The second example is completely different. It's a company called Valve. Valve makes computer games, and these slides are based on their employee handbook, which they put out on the internet, or at least someone leaked out on the internet. Now, the key idea inside Valve is flatness, right? Not a hierarchy of workers, but a setup where everyone is equal to everyone else. An organization that is completely flat. Now, what this means in real life is that there are no managers. There are no employees within Valve that tell any other employees what to do. That sounds really weird. Inside the employee handbook, there are diagrams written by people who work at Valve that try and describe what this really means. Right? So Valve was founded by a guy named Gabe. And so you can see in diagram 1, Gabe is kind of a little higher than everyone else, but still just flat. He has nobody who reports to him, and he reports to no one else. You can also see in diagram 2 a little bit of tongue-in-cheek. Somebody named Chad, don't know who it is. He's a little bit lower than everybody else. But in reality, it's far more like diagrams 3 or 4, or probably more like 5. It's just a chaotic mass of employees that figure out what to do every day on their own. Now, the first challenge in an organization like this is, what on earth do you do as a new employee or an existing employee? Well, no one tells you what to do. It's your job as an employee to be productive. And so what you actually do is to look around online and, physically within the building, look around at what other people are doing. And if they need your skills, if there's a project out there that needs your skills, well, you just join in. And really, there's no forms to fill out, right? There's no manager tracking this because there are no managers. What you do is you simply agree with another employee, or 2 or 5 or 10, that you're going to be part of the team, and you join the team. It's really as simple as that. This employee manual is written a little bit humorous. It's written in this old style, or drawn in this old style. And so there are some examples of, how do you move? How do you physically go to another team? Well, they like team members to work near each other. All the desks are on wheels. All the chairs are on wheels too. So what you do to move to another team is you unplug your desk, you roll it over to another part of the office, and you plug it back in. Again, talk about freedom and responsibility. Well, it's there in spades at Valve. And this is true for anything happening within Valve. If there's a committee to decide on, let's say, the next trade show, the next big E3 conference, and you want to be part of that decision-making team, well, then you can be. You simply go over and volunteer your services to be part of the team. And as long as the rest of the people on the team say yes, well, then you're part of the team. Can you be in more than one project at a time? Well, if you are physically able and you can deliver to more than one team, then sure, you can be on as many teams as you want. It really is that open. It's far more like school, right? It's far more like school where you have these other activities, and if you want to join one, well, then you're free to join one. Within the Valve culture, there's a name for these teams. They call them cabals. Right? A cabal is really a multidisciplinary project team. It's a team that has all the parts, all the people, and all the talent needed to deliver upon the deliverable. Deliver upon, usually in this case, a game or a platform that runs games. It's interesting that in the second of 2 examples, we again see something in the culture that has to deal with failure, that has to deal with people making mistakes. And this is vastly different than that cubicle corporate culture that Dilbert and The Office live in. Over there, you're not expected to make any mistakes. Right? Somehow, down that big hierarchy, you're expected to do everything totally correct at all times. But out in the world where you're given freedom and responsibility, be it Netflix or at Valve, you're expected that mistakes will happen. Right? Humans make mistakes. So at Valve, they have a rather simple policy for what happens if you make a mistake. Make the customers happy. And that's it. Right? If a mistake is seen by customers, then do something to make those customers happy. Because again, as we know from the past steps of the next step, you don't have a company unless you have customers, right? The job of a company is to create something that customers want to buy. So how does a new project get started at Valve? Well, it can be as simple as you're sitting around at lunch, you have an idea, you share it with a coworker, he thinks or she thinks it's a great idea, and if the two of you are all that's needed to go do it, you go do it. Usually it'd be something much bigger. So what you would do then is tell the company of this great idea. Usually this is done online, might be done on a wall space, or again over lunch. Recruit the team you need to go do it, and then go do it. There's no one to tell you not to. There was no bosses inside Valve. Now, given this structure of total freedom and responsibility, what kind of people work well in this structure? Well, Valve talks about them as T-shaped people. They're T-shaped people because A, they know how to do a lot of different things. But at the same time, they have some discipline, they have some experience at doing one thing really, really well. So that way they can fit on most any team in doing something that's broad, but when a team really needs that expertise, it exists there in Valve. Somebody has that expertise that they can either tap to go do on one project or teach others how to do or so forth. Now to build this culture, you need a lot of high-powered people who are really self-directed. People who don't need to be told what needs to get done day after day, who can think that up themselves, form people around them, build teams, and go get things done. All right, that's kind of different than the Netflix side, where you do still have managers. You do still have people that are making sure the right things are getting done according to the higher ups. All right, well, within the Valve structure, they still want to get really high-powered, really strong employees. And the way they talk about it is by having the people doing the interviewing, which are whatever people who decide they want to do the interviewing, get those people to try and hire people that are stronger and better than they are. Right? So that what that really does is create a virtuous cycle of better and better and better employees. Right? We've heard this talked about in other cultures of A players hire A players, B players hire C players. And that gets you a vicious cycle of worse and worse people on the team. That really, again, goes back to that culture of cubicles and people who are not engaged in their work. Well, at Valve, they're always trying to find someone who is bigger and stronger and more supportive of this organization than the people already there. Now, whether that happens in real life or not, probably not in all cases. But nonetheless, the goal is out there, and the people understand what the goal are, and so they do strive to build that team better and better. And this is a company with 200 employees, and the culture, it's working. Right? The company makes a large amount of money. They got products that customers love, and the employees far more than not just love this culture. That said, there are some downsides. Right? This culture doesn't work for everything. Here's a few things that they in their own employee manual says they're not very good at. First, they're not good at helping people do a career path or finding their way through the org. They just kind of drop them in and say, go find something to do. They're also not good at mentoring people. Right? There are no people who are out there to be managers and mentors. Right? It's just a big mass of equal employees. Right? Well, in real life, some people are a little more equal than others, but nonetheless, they're not there to help mentor the next employees. They're also, strangely enough, not good at spreading the information about what's going on inside Valve. Right? There are a few other companies that have adopted this style of, I'll call it management, but nonetheless, Valve itself has never built a really good tool to explain to the employees what all other employees are working on. It's also a bit of a struggle on finding and hiring people that fit into this culture. Not everybody does. That's just something that falls out of this particular style, but it's true of every corporate culture. There are a lot of people out there that just can't work in an open office, and yet there are companies that have open offices. There are people out there that just don't like working in cubicles, and there are companies where there's nothing but cubicles. And there are places where everything's a private office. Microsoft was famous for originally having private offices for everyone. And that's great when you don't want to interact with people, but if you have a culture where you need to interact, where it's creative, and you need to bump into people and so forth, well then private offices is a terrible idea. There's trade-offs to all these different cultures. And in this particular culture, this is the trade-off, that it's really hard to find people who are willing to work at a place that has no management, really has no titles, has really no career path. That's just a downside of what Valve is not good at. And before we leave this model, it's really interesting to see other companies that have tried to tack on this Valve model after the fact. Right? This flat Valve model was there from really the start. But at Treehouse, which is an online site for education, for tech education, well, they decided one day to throw away their managers. They decided after they were already a multi-million-dollar revenue company that it was time to throw away the management structure and move towards something that was way more like Valve. However, what they did not do, the big difference between Treehouse and Valve, is that the two co-founders at Treehouse put themselves above the rest of the hierarchy, put themselves above the rest of the employees. So at Treehouse, it really isn't totally flat. It's more like figure one in that Valve diagram. It's more like the two co-founders are the bosses, and everyone else can do whatever they want. And one of the co-founders at Treehouse has been blogging about this experience. He's been blogging about how the transition has happened, how it works, what doesn't work. And what's really fascinating is that from his perspective, from the perspective of the boss, well, he can't tell people what to do anymore. They are, like Valve, allowed to pick their own projects, right? Pick their own teams, pick their own schedules, get things done whenever they should be done, instead of whenever the bosses say they should be done. And he used to be able to just walk up to someone and say, we need this done now. And he just can't do that anymore. And he used to be able to sit back and say, these are the 5 things that we're going to work on this quarter. And he can't do that anymore. Right? And so what he says from his perspective is that it really is chaos, that there is a lot of work that gets duplicated. Right? There is work that gets wasted. However, in general, the employees are way happier. They're getting just as much done as before, despite the waste. And that the employees really love this model. And so he's not in the least sorry that they switched over, but he's just fascinated by the differences between the no manager model and the manager model. And I'm fascinated at looking at the difference between Treehouse and Valve, because Treehouse isn't truly the no manager model, that there really are just a few people in charge to make those critical decisions like, are we going to hire anyone? Who's worth fire? Who's not pulling their weight right now? Who needs to be fired? Right? Those are things that don't work really well in the Valve model. It really turns out to be a little bit too much like high school when you read the backstories at Valve. Whereas at Treehouse, it's more like the school. All the students are doing whatever they think is best for them, and the two school masters are making sure that the students stay in line.